Daniel chapter 12, verse 6. And one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, How long shall it be to the end of these wonders? Verse 7. And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever, that it shall be for a time, times and a half, and when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. Verse 11. And from the time that the daily shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. The delay in the book of Daniel and the New World Order, written by Marion Berry and copyrighted in 2002. Chapter 12, the delay of Daniel, chapter 12, verse 11, in the total context of the book of Daniel. The total context and perspective of the book of Daniel. The last chapter of Daniel is difficult to explain if the Bible student does not understand that in the previous chapters there are 4 related prophetic historical outlines that provide the context for the daily of Daniel chapter 12, verse 11. Looking at the hermeneutic principle, now where we are at is number 10. Verses in a prophetic historical outline must be kept in sequence, moving forward in time, fulfilled by the sequence of historical events. In each prophetic historical outline, each verse moves forward in time and in strict sequence. Each additional outline moves further forward in time with additional information. Each outline becomes more specific and detailed. The prophetic expositor must see clearly that the movement of the entire book of Daniel is advancing forward in time. Chapter 1 begins action in 606 BC, moving steadily forward in time to final events in chapter 12. There are many prophetic expositors who feel free when making applications to prophetic historical outlines to move forward and backward in time, imposing their own speculations upon any prophetic text. But it is strict obedience to the hermeneutic principles of logical processes which produce present truth. Only logical prophetic exposition is acceptable. In an historical prophetic outline, the verses in that outline are matched to historical events which occur in timed sequence. The only logical prophetic exposition must keep both the Bible verses and historical events in sequence. The sevens in the book of Daniel. Not only does the book of Revelation contain prophetic outline in series of sevens, but there are sevens also found in the book of Daniel, which presents 7, not just 4, empires from 606 BC to the second coming of Jesus. The 7 empires revealed in the book of Daniel. In Daniel chapter 11, there is a prophetic historical outline reiterating the succession of empires as revealed in Daniel chapters 2, 7, and 8 and 9. Chapter 2 brings to view 4 great old world empires: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Gracia, and Rome. Chapter 7 brings to view a 5th empire, that of the papal supremacy in the Old World, which reigned from AD 538 to 1798. Although Daniel 2 does not name a 5th empire, the toes of the image representing the kingdoms of Europe were to be ruled over by the little horn described in Daniel chapter 7. And chapter 11 brings to view two more empires, the sixth and seventh. Chapter 11 is a study of the kings who reign over the seven empires which rise and fall. In Daniel chapter 11, not just four empires are brought to view as in Daniel chapter 2, not just five empires as in chapter 7, but chapter 11 reiterates the rise and fall of all seven empires. It describes the kings who sat on the throne of those empires, as well as that which will sit in the future. Daniel chapter 11 lays the foundation for the Daniel 12 epilogue. When chapter 11 is given a logical treatment so that each verse is kept in its context of strict sequence, moving steadily through time, matched with sequential historical events, then and only then do the seven empires emerge as one historical unit from 606 BC to the resurrection at the second coming of Christ. The last verses of the Daniel chapter 11 prophetic historical outline, which extends into chapter 12 verses 1 to 3, actually refer to the final events of earth history, which describe the final deliverance of God's people and the resurrection. It is concerning these events that Daniel makes inquiry in Daniel chapter 12, to which the answer is given in the three timelines of Daniel chapter 12, verses 7 to 12. Therefore, Daniel chapter 11 lays the foundation on which to base the epilogue in Daniel chapter 12. Daniel chapter 11, verses 30 to 35, describes the rise and fall of the papal supremacy, which lasted from AD 538 to 1798, when it was conquered by an atheist, Napoleon Bonaparte of France. Verses 36 to 39, continuing in perfect sequence, described the rise of an atheistic government, the USSR, which aspired to rule the world, persecuted Christians, and had a landmass over 11 time zones, much larger than any empire which preceded it. Each empire increases in size. Verse 40 describes the conflict in which President Reagan and Pope John Paul II, the King of the North, worked together using every means at hand to bring the USSR to its end in 1989. A review of Daniel chapter 11, verses 41 to 44, describes the rise of the seventh and last empire, which will be the one world order with a papal head. Those who will finally escape are those who receive the seal of God. He shall plant the tabernacles of his palace, according to Daniel chapter 11, verse 45. Pope John Paul II has already declared Old Jerusalem to be a holy city and place of worship for all the peoples of the world. And since other popes have also declared this. Verse 45 reveals where the seat of government of the seventh empire will be. The one world order with papal head, according to Daniel chapter 11, verse 45, will establish its eminent political seat of government in the glorious holy mountain or site of Old Jerusalem. This will be the power, seat, and authority, or daily, which has then passed from the kings of the earth over the one world order government to establish the second papal supremacy as described in Revelation chapter 13. John Paul II has now established moral authority. The power and seat or throne are secured by the popular admission of the popes, moral authority. Members of Congress, as we have already seen in the United States of America, have recently, which that happened in the 1989 era, presented a gold medal to the Pope acknowledging his moral authority, and under a financial or other crisis, the world will welcome him as their spiritual and political father. And we realize that John Paul II is now deceased, but any pope that come after follow through with the plan of the previous one. This is not a pope business, it's a Vatican business. It's having to do with lasting already for hundreds of years. The seventh empire will come to its end. Verse 45 declares that the final or last papal supremacy will come to his hand, and none shall help him. And he shall plant the tabernacles or place of worship of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. Yet shall he come to his hand, and none shall help him. Between the seas, he will gain control of that city, Old Jerusalem, which is actually situated between 7 seas: the Mediterranean, the Sea of Galilee, the Black Sea, the Caspian Sea, the Red Sea, the Dead Sea, and the Persian Gulf. In the glorious holy mountain, according to Daniel chapter 11, verse 45. In the book of Daniel, the exiled prophet prayed toward Old Jerusalem 3 times a day. When he spoke of that city, he referred to it as the glorious holy mountain. And that is found in Daniel chapter 6, verse 10, and again in chapter 11, verse 41. In Daniel chapter 8, the correct view of the daily before 1844 explained how the papacy gained power, seat, and authority in AD 538. Its reign of 1260 years is known as the papal supremacy number 1. The correct view, then, is still correct today. The Daniel chapter 12, verse 11 daily should mean exactly the same thing and be consistently applied to understand how the papacy will gain political power, seat, and authority over the future New World Order to establish papal supremacy number 2 in our immediate future. Daniel 8 applied to the past. Daniel 12 applies to the future. Daniel chapter 8 verse 13 posed a question. How long will the little horn have the power to rule? And in the following verse, in Daniel chapter 8 verse 14, that question is answered with its 2300-day-year timeline. The how long question of Daniel chapter 8 verse 13 is repeated. In Daniel chapter 8 verse 11, the papacy is called the little horn, but in Daniel chapter 12 verse 11, it is called the abomination that maketh desolate. The question is still the same. How long will the papacy continue to have the power to rule until it comes to its end? Just as the how long question in Daniel chapter 8 verse 13 was answered by the 2300 timeline, again, that question in Daniel chapter 12 verse 6 is answered with the 3 timelines of Daniel chapter 12 verses 7 to 12. It is answered by Jesus, the man clothed in linen, or palmony, wonderful numberer and revealer of secret, Jesus Christ, who gives the answer in 3 timelines. Those timelines tell how long it will be to the end of these wonders, according to Daniel chapter 12 verse 6. Looking again at the strong analytical concordance, certain saint, as of Daniel chapter 8 verse 13, the Hebrew word is number 6422 and 6423. Palmony, a specified person. Certain saint, Hebrew word number 6918. Kodesh or Kadosh, and from 6942 as a non-God by eminence, an angel, a saint, holy one, saint. And again, this is taken from the Strong Analytical Concordance and studying the Hebrew word. It is the translators of the King James Version Bible who have indicated in the margin that this term refers to Jesus as the wonderful numberer and revealer of secrets. The 2300 timeline of Daniel chapter 8 verse 14 predicted the end of papal rule. The answer to the question in Daniel chapter 8 verse 13 was given in the 2300-year timeline. It revealed the fact that the first papal supremacy and also the second or future papal supremacy would be brought to judgment and finally be destroyed. That judgment process was to begin in AD 1844 at the end of the 2300-year timeline and continue all the way through the judgment of the wicked during the millennium. The second coming of Jesus is the dividing line between the investigative judgment of the righteous and the wicked. The 1260 timelines of Daniel chapter 7 verse 25 and Daniel chapter 12 verse 7 predicts the end of two papal supremacies. The Daniel chapter 7 verse 25 timeline of time and times and the dividing of time, 1260 days of years, predicted that the persecuting papal supremacy number 1 was to end in AD 1798 according to the prophecy. The Daniel chapter 12 verse 7 timeline of time, times, and a half is a literal days 1260. And it predicts or prophesies that the persecuting papal supremacy number 2, yet future, will also come to its end. The 1290 timeline of Daniel chapter 12 verse 11 predicts or prophesies that the future papal supremacy will end after a 1290 literal days reign. In Daniel chapter 12 verse 11, it tells in clear language exactly how many literal days the second papal reign will last. A surprisingly short time, only 1290 literal days. Daniel chapter 12 verse 7 states that a persecutor will persecute God's saints for 1260 literal days, and Daniel chapter 12 verse 11 states how long the persecutor will reign. Daniel 8 was fulfilled with a past application, and Daniel chapter 12 will be fulfilled with a future application. Daniel 8 verse 13 contains a question: how long will the little horn papacy have the power to rule? In the next verse, Daniel chapter 8 verse 14, that question is answered by the 2300-year timeline. The how long question in Daniel chapter 8 verse 13 is repeated in Daniel chapter 12 verse 6. Instead of referring to the papacy as the little horn, it is called the abomination that maketh desolate. But the question in essence is still the same. The answer to both questions in Daniel chapter 8 verses 13 and 14 and again in Daniel chapter 12 verse 6 is answered by Christ himself. In Daniel 8 he is spoken of as the wonderful numberer, revealer of secrets. But in Daniel chapter 12 verses 6 and 7 he is known as the man clothed in linen. The fact that on the Day of Atonement in Israel, the priest entered the most holy, or the high priest, in linen, reveals Jesus as the high priest in an antitypical Day of Atonement, placing it in a timed context after AD 1844. The correct view before 1844 is still the correct view, we could say, today. The correct view of the daily before 1844 explained how the papacy gained power, seat, and authority in the papal supremacy number 1 in AD 538. The correct view of the daily is still the correct view today. That correct view should be applied in exactly the same consistent manner today. The correct view enables God's people to understand the daily in Daniel chapter 12, verse 11. It explains how the Pope will again gain political power, seat, and authority over the future New World Order to establish papal supremacy number 2 in our immediate future. Daniel chapter 12, verses 6 and 7, paraphrased. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, there stood other two, the one on this side of the bank of the river, and the other on that side of the bank of the river. And one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, How long shall it be to the end of these wonders? And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swore by him that liveth forever, that it shall be for a time, times, and a half time. And this is 1260 literal days. When he, the papal supremacy, working through a one world government, shall have accomplished to scatter or crush and persecute the power or the hand of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. Adventism moves forward on the wings of prophecy. Adventism began with prophetic study of the one timeline of Daniel chapter 8, verse 14. Adventism works will be concluded with a worldwide message born on wings of prophecy again, focused on the last three timelines of Daniel chapter 12. The prophetic triad prepares the saints to give the loud cry. It is the messages of the prophetic triad, Daniel, Revelation, and the Song of Solomon, which will go in the glory and power of the Revelation 18 angel during the latter reign of the Holy Spirit. Daniel chapter 12 timelines are a message of hope and cheer. Those who study the three timeline of Daniel chapter 12 respond to that precious message with hope and joy, because it testifies of the nearness of the second coming of Jesus and deliverance of God's people from a final death decree. And it is indeed a present-day message altogether. This message must be understood by the 144,000 before they can give the loud cry to the world. The entire book of Revelation cannot be understood until all 12 chapters of Daniel are mastered. Those who permit the prophecies to direct them to the Lord our righteousness will be ready to meet the coming bridegroom. In conclusion, Adventism began and will end with parallel messages. The final warning of the third angel of Revelation chapter 14 will be amplified by timeline warnings in the loud cry. The amplification of the three angels' messages in that light will lighten the whole earth. The AD 1833 to 1844 Judgment Hour cry mistakenly announced the executive judgment. After AD 1844, they discovered their mistake. But the loud cry will accurately warn of the end of all things and an executive judgment to occur at the second coming of Jesus. God's great mercy and care for his Sabbath-keeping remnant from AD 1844 to the unsealing of the daily. In the providence of God, in the sealing of Daniel chapter 12, Satan has been permitted to hide the correct view or true meaning of the daily until it should be unsealed to the last generation. The eyes has been directed away from the correct view as to how the future papacy will obtain power to rule, seat, and great authority. In God's great mercy, the eyes of God's people have been directed instead to Christ's ministry in the most holy place of the heavenly sanctuary. But now, as the New World Order is ready to place popery back upon its throne, it is time for the correct view to be reestablished and for the third angel's message to go forth in the warnings of Daniel as well as Revelation, in the glory and power of the Revelation 18 angel final call out of Babylon. Adventism, the daily, and the New World Order. A focus on the heavenly ministry of Christ is spiritual and good, vital to the plan of salvation, but it is not the correct view of the daily. An incorrect view of the daily draws the eye away from other truths vital to the future of Adventism at this time. We repeat, an incorrect view of the daily draws the eye away from other truths vital to the future of Adventism at this time. It is dangerous, just as prophecies are being unsealed at this time, because truth out of its setting is error, and error always pulls behind it a train of evil circumstances. What evil circumstance could await Adventism? An incorrect view opened the door to modern ecumenism. As the New World Order emerges with its papal head, absorbing all institutionalized religions into one world unit, there will be those in Adventism at all levels who will see no reason why this should not be done. Thinking peace and safety, they will then deny the third angel's message as predicted and oppose those who try to give that warning. Many, for the sake of buying and selling and business as usual, will want to be part of the New World Order and one world popular church. An incorrect view of the daily, with its focus on heaven rather than the beast and his mark, opens the door to ecumenism. So, the focus on heaven is the vertical, but the beast and his mark is the horizontal. The earth, what's happening on the earth in the meantime, and an incorrect view of the daily, with its focus on heaven rather than the beast and his mark, opens the door to ecumenism. It is not saying not to teach or believe the focus on heaven. It is saying we must keep both in line, because one basically assert the other. This would bring about a split in Adventism, and while some will become part of that popular nominal world church, another group will be only that hated sect, giving the loud cry warning of Revelation chapter 13 and Daniel chapter 12. And it's happening right now in 2025. This was written in 2002. Many in Adventism all over the world have already asserted their freedom in Jesus Christ to give His truth at the very cost of their lives. And we can witness to that. Only those who have been fortified by a study of the Word of God and treasure truth as it represents the character of God will be able to survive the coming crisis. God has promised to see His true followers through what lies ahead. While many perish for lack of knowledge, the path of prophetic light will stabilize those whose hearts are dedicated to God. Now, we will continue in the next chapter, but in parenthesis, at this very moment, as we are listening to those words, as it is given right now, not when it will be heard in the next month or two. At this very moment, November 2025, when this audio is being prepared, the papacy right now is playing its role of a church and state government. The present Pope is presently visiting the head of government in Turkey. And another day of this week, he will be visiting with the head of the Orthodox Church in Turkey, more precisely in Nicaea, and Urkish we believe in the new name of Nicaea, but nevertheless it's still the same place. And then he will be also visiting the head of the government in Lebanon. And then following, he will also visit with the leaders, the religious leader in Lebanon. This has definitely an appearance of ecumenism and Chrislam religion, and that we have discussed in other studies. Watch the current events because they always are in line with what is happening in prophecy when the time has come. On the following pages, a list is given titled Parallels, revealing linkage between the judgment hour cry at the beginning and the loud cry as the concluding work of Adventism. This is more in parentheses, but we will proceed with it to make you see the connection of what's happening now so that we are intelligent and knowledgeable. The beginning and concluding message of Adventism. Adventism means we're expecting the second coming of Christ. Just like at the time of the Millerite, they were called Adventists. So the parallel is very simple. The judgment hour cry, 1833-1844, and the loud cry, which is still future, of Revelation 14 and 18. So therefore, we simply have to follow the columns on the left with the number 1. There was given a warning message of the first and second angel. On the right, in the future, there will be given a warning message with the third and fourth angel. Number 2, the question was asked, how long? In Daniel chapter 8, verse 13, that was answered with the judgment hour cry. And we have to look now at the future. Another question is asked in Daniel chapter 12, verse 6, how long? The answer to both of these questions in the past and future are, number 3, 1 timeline in the past. In the future, 3 timelines. Number 4, the papacy number 1 was called the little horn in the past, and that's the era of 1844. But in the future, papacy number 2 will be called the abomination of desolation, according to Daniel chapter 12. Question number 5. Daily taken away from pagan Rome, decretal letter. And then in the future, daily taken away from all nations with the universal Sunday decree. This has not happened yet. But the number 5 in the past had happened. Number 6. Ending of prophetic 2300 timeline. That was 1844. Ending of prophetic 1260, 1290, 1335 timelines, future. Number 7, pointing to events. That was in 1844 with the wonderful 2300 days, which was the beginning of the investigative judgment of the dead, not the second coming. In the future, it points to events, not the day and hour of the second coming. And again, it's in the light of the judgment of the living. They always balance each other, those wonderful prophecies. So in Adventism, it began with the judgment hour cry in the past, 1844. In the future, it concludes with the loud cry. The question, how long? Daniel 8:13, the little horn, papal reign, and again it's corresponding to Daniel chapter 7 verse 25, which went from 538 to 1798, and the daily was taken away. The question, how long? In Daniel chapter 12 verses 6 and 11, the abomination of desolation, and a papal reign number 2. Daniel chapter 12 verse 11 and chapter 8 verses 23 to 25 corresponding, but future Revelation chapter 13 verses 14 to 18. The daily taken away. So the question has an answer, both from the past and the future, a timeline. Daniel 8:14 and the 2300 days, which occurred in 1844, with the investigative judgment which began, and when there was declared there was time no longer, as according to Revelation chapter 10 verse 6, and it was a prophetic time, a day for a year, and it ended in 1844. The answer in the future, three timeline, 1260, 1290, 1335, corresponding in the future to Revelation chapter 18, verses 1 to 4, chapter 10, verse 6, and the executive judgment then after this period will begin, which is expressed in Revelation chapter 16, verse 17. Then chapter you have to read further with the book of Revelation, because it also goes very well from the investigative now to the executive judgment, and more or less it brings actually the prophetic time to end, probationary time ending, and earth time will end. So the 1260 days persecution will end, 1290 days papal reign will end, and 1335 days the wait ends, and it corresponds to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And then of course there will be an executive judgment for the righteous, which goes to heaven, and the executive judgment for the wicked will be at the third coming. These are beautiful studies, and we must pass a lot of time in order to understand them, and also in order to be able to comprehend further understanding. Then we will pass to chapter 13 in the next study, the daily sovereignty of the nations taken away. We encourage you to study up to page 94, and as well remember how important it is to know the hermeneutic principle presented in the daily 14 of them, and we have reached number 10 already. In a prophetic historical outline, the sequential order of verses may not be violated. Number 2, the hermeneutic principle of the imperative of sequence and continuity in the exposition of prophetic outlines. Prophetic outline verses must be kept in strict sequence and match consistently to the sequence and continuity of historical events. Page 9, number 3, the context is king. The hermeneutic principle of historical context. Truth out of its setting is error, and a text out of context is a pretext. Now we're entering number 4, the hermeneutic principle of language context. Context determines whether a timeline is given in literal or symbolic language. According to the Great Controversy, page 599, the language of the Bible is to be understood in its most obvious literal meaning unless a figure or symbol is employed. Passing now to page 12, number 5, the hermeneutic principle, the Bible is its own expositor of symbolism. Number 6, the hermeneutic principle of structural context permits the Bible to be its own expositor. It takes precedence over all human speculation. Very important. Number 7, the hermeneutic principle of contemporary recognition of prophetic fulfillment. Not until a prophecy is very near its fulfillment or already fulfilled are God's people able to know of surety the exact application of a prophecy. Now, page 23, hermeneutic principle define word meanings from the original Hebrew and Greek. So this was number 8. As we continue now with the next, we're approaching number 10. So this is number 9. Hermeneutic principle, one verse of scripture or one truth may not destroy another. The spiritual aspects of Christ's ministry must not be permitted to obscure the information intended to give God's people an understanding of the political rise and fall of the nations and the great controversy struggle between good and evil. Always remember, heaven vertical, earth horizontal. And those two, they cannot be separated. The Bible is written that way. The spiritual and the physical. It's always like this that we study the Bible. And number 10, the newest one, hermeneutic principle. Verses in a prophetic historical outline must be kept in sequence, moving forward in time, fulfilled by the sequence of historical events. In each prophetic historical outline, each verse moves forward in time and in strict sequence. Each additional outline moves further forward in time with additional information. Each outline becomes more specific and detailed. Beautiful study that brings us closer and closer now to see these events happening, especially as we study the current event. And as you know, this year, 2025, the papacy was celebrating 1700 years of existence, as they claim, but more or so, they were also celebrating the Decree of Nicaea, which was actually enacted in 321 AD, but it was enforced in 325 AD. And Nicaea is a real city in Turkey, and it has changed names, but nevertheless, it's still the city that is spoken about in history, which changed Christianity. We will not see forever, but until now. And that's when Easter appeared in history and the imposition of the worship of the Day of the Sun, Sunday. May the Lord bless you till we meet again. And we need to pray and we need to fast at this time more than ever to be aware and understand these important events that correspond and fulfill the Word of God. May the Lord bless you.